when they initially started, we didn't know much about the organism, but now we are like able to understand the lot of their pathological mechanism, and also the genome organization, how they do, how they interact with humans. So many stuff we now know. So the disease caused by the SARS-CoV-2 is called as COVID-19 because it's a coronavirus infectious disease 2019. That's why it's called as COVID-19. And why it is called as SARS-CoV-2 is that because there's similarity with the previous SARS-CoV, which was like encountered in 2003. So that is the main reason why we call them as SARS-CoV-2. But this virus is really strange, and I talk about that, like how this organization of the genome is really. So as we all know that it started from Wuhan and slowly started spreading to the entire part of the world very rapidly, because their or not is the spreading nature is much more higher than the SARS as well as the MERS. So these are the preceders before the SARS-CoV-2. So in 2020 March 11, 11, so WHO announced the COVID-19 as a pandemic because it started spreading all over the world. So the WHO announced this as a pandemic, and they alerted all the countries and what are the precautions need to be taken, and how to stop the entry of the different people from different countries. And this is as of 19th May, we encountered more than 4 million people were affected, and 2.57 millions were like 0.2 millions were already lost their life. So talk about the origin, like where could have been. So now we all know that bats is acting as a reservoir for the coronaviruses, especially the horseshoe bats. They are like the natural reservoir of SARS-CoV-2. And not only like SARS-CoV-2, if you look at other viruses, Marburg virus, Ebola, Nipah, SARS, most of them have association with bats or any other animals for that matter. So one important thing I want to stress here is that compared to current SARS-CoV-2, the fatality rate is a little higher for other viruses compared to the current SARS-CoV-2. For example, to take Marburg, it is 81 percentage. To take Ebola, 44, and Nipah, 53. So these are really high. And what is very unique to SARS-CoV-2 is that the spreading nature. They are like super spreader. Like SARS-CoV-2 is super spreader because their R naught is now reaching to 4. And recently today in a newspaper in Germany, they have a second wave which has much more higher R naught, which means that it can spread much more faster than what previously was. So that's really worrisome. And also like MERS, bird flu, now currently we have the SARS-CoV-2. So all of them add any animal association or bat association. That's what I wanted to tell. Like, so when we talk about how these viruses are evolved as a human pathogen, so like you take rabies, Ebola, dengue, and HIV. So they all like somehow originated from animals to human, either by human invaded to the forest or like deforestation, or they tend to be more closely associated with their environment. That's made these viruses evolve into a human viruses. So, for example, this is the genome of a virus. When they shift from one animal host to a human host, they have a little change because they need to undergo adaptation. Also, like a kind of immune stress is also there. So that makes them to a change in the genome. So that initially they will have only few cycles, or it will be a one single episode. Whereas when they keep on these kind of interactions takes place between the animal and human, so there is more kind of mutations occur, and then they slowly start spreading between few individuals. So then later they tend to adapt into a human viruses. Then they keep spreading between human, and finally they become only for humans. So there won't be any cross infection to the animal where it was acquired. So this is merely an adaptation, how we adapt to the different climates. These viruses also adapt themselves in order to withstand the immune pressure or like environmental pressure and so on. So just to show you like how this coronavirus structure looks like, I'm pretty sure that many of you are aware about this. Like I just wanted to tell you the spike protein, which is very essential for the interaction with the ACE2 receptor of the type 2 lung cells. And you also have an envelope protein and membrane protein, which is the largest part of the virus protein. This is a major part of the virus is the membrane protein. And we also have other structural protein called nucleocapsid protein. So they totally have 4: spike, membrane, envelope, and a nucleocapsid. The nucleocapsid is essential for packing these positive sense, single-stranded, non-segmented RNA into the virus. And they also have, apart from 4 structural protein, they do have 16 non-structural protein, which is very essential for them to replicate within the host. And what is the uniqueness of these viruses that usually they are roughly 30 kb in genome size, not big compared to human. They're a very, very, very tiny genome. And they have a unique deletion when compared to previous SARS virus, around 382 bases at the ORF8. And also they have other fewer mutations in the spike protein and other part of the genome as well. Just to quickly show you about the classification of the virus, they are like comes under nidovirus. Nido means nested. Why? Because it is nested is that the coronavirus have a special feature of going for a nested mRNA synthesis, which resulted in a subgenomic mRNA. I'll talk about the subgenomic mRNA, how they are produced and what is the role of them. And previously we had 6 SARS-CoV viruses. Of that, like 4 were very mild. They cause very mild infections in human and very rare. And rarely, like you can get the SARS-CoV-2 and MERS-CoV, which was very really serious infections, which was encountered in 2003 and 2012 respectively. So these are classified into alpha, beta, gamma, delta based on the genomic nature, and they also have subgenus. Subgenus is based on the whether they belong to SARS-CoV or MERS. If it is SARS, it's called as SARS-BICO virus, which means that SARS beta coronavirus. Currently, we have a new member, which is a novel coronavirus, which is not similar to the previously existing one. That's why it is named as novel coronavirus. And as I said earlier, most of these coronaviruses act as a reservoir. The reservoir is the one where like these viruses are present just without causing any harm to it, and then they transfer to by accidentally, or since they are close contact with these animals, they get these viruses intermediate host. In intermediate host, they may or they may not have any problem because of these viruses. In case of current pangolin, in Malayan pangolin, they have really shown that in the chest X-ray of pangolin clearly shows the typical sign of ground glass appearance similar to the how human has. So there was a publication from Australia which clearly shows how this ground glass appearance looks like. And also in case of SARS-CoV, CVH acted as intermediate, whereas MERS, camel acted as intermediate. So they jump to an intermediate host, they undergo some minor changes, and then they tend to get adapted to the human species. This is interesting. Like this is just to show you like a phylogenetic analysis in order to understand how closely they are related to bat viruses and pangolin viruses. When this whole genome comparison was made, phylogenetic analysis, it clearly shows that they are closely related to bat as well as pangolins. And when you talk about the SARS or MERS, they are much more closest to the previous SARS virus rather than the MERS virus. That's why it is called as SARS-CoV-2. Again, this shows that they belong to a beta coronavirus. You could see that coronaviruses from pigs, bats, human, and also from different animals, dogs. So this clearly shows that they are mostly similar to the bats and pangolins and also the SARS virus. So this is what I was telling about. They belong to a Sarsaparilla subgenus. So this clearly showed they have this is the current red color is the current SARS-CoV-2. They have a much more similarity to the SARS-CoV as well as the pangolins and bat coronaviruses. And this is the Merbico virus, which is a MERS beta coronavirus. This is really interesting, and when they started tracing the possible origin of SARS-CoV-2, Anderson et al. Pointed out that there are 6 key residues which are mainly necessary for interacting with the ACE2 receptors. Those are highlighted in blue boxes, and these all amino acid residues are called as receptor binding domain. And within receptor binding domain, we have these 6 amino acids regions are called receptor binding motif. These are very essential for interaction with the ACE2 receptors. What is very interesting is that when they compared the current SARS-CoV-2 with the previous SARS-CoV, they didn't have much similarity with the key residues for the interaction of ACE2 receptors. Rather than they had a very high similarity between the bat RATG13 as well as pangolin, and more than bats they were pretty much similar to pangolins rather than the bats. So this clearly shows that from the bat this might have gone to pangolin, and then they have mutated a lot and adapted to the pangolin, and from the pangolin they jump to human, and then they cause a severe disease. That's why I told you, like, some studies clearly shows that the ground glass appearance, the chest texture of a pangolin, which is pretty similar to the human. And other interesting factor is that when we claim that it is from intermediate host pangolin, but when they started comparing the pangolin spike protein, there is a region called S1 S2 cleavage site, which is very essential in the spike protein. They have 2 subunits, S1 subunit, S2 subunit. They need to be cleaved with the moment when they enter into the host by the host furin proteases. So when they cleave only, they will be able to enter into the cells. So what the residues involved is that between the R and S, the cleavage sites fall. Interestingly, where the S1 and S2 cleavage site is present, they have a unique polybasic cleavage site, which is pretty similar to MERS virus. So this was really interesting. These studies are clearly indicating that these viruses are pretty strange, and they have a spike protein similar to pangolins, but the S1 S2 cleavage site is pretty similar to MERS, and this still wonders like how these recombinations might have taken place. And other interesting fact is that when they started comparing the SARS-CoV-2 and bats, this is really interesting. So the moment you compare the whole genome of SARS-CoV-2 with the bat coronaviruses, the whole genome sequence as well as the spike protein were pretty similar to the bat viruses. But the moment you start comparing the receptor binding domain and motif, the SARS-CoV-2 is much more similar to pangolins rather than the bat. So to put it very simply, as a whole genome, they have pretty higher similarity to the bat viruses. But when you consider the key residues of the spike protein which interact with the ACE2 receptor, they are 100% similar to pangolin. Very interestingly, the S1 S2 host cleavage site, which is not similar to bat viruses and pangolin, they have pretty similar to MERS viruses. So all these studies clearly indicate that these coronaviruses might be a chimera of 2-3 different viruses which might have been taken place in a single host at a given time. So just to show you about the genomic organization structure, they have ORF1A, ORF1AB, spike protein, E protein, M protein, and N protein. What is very interesting here is that these ORF1A and ORF1B codes for 16 proteins, which are enzymes, proteins, and which involved in the replication mechanism of the viruses. And there are key proteins which are involved in the replication, the mainly RDRP and other proteases, which I'll show you in next slides. And one more thing I want to stress here is that you take either alpha coronavirus, beta coronavirus, or gamma delta, they have much similarity in the genome. Even though there's a variations, the arrangement is somewhat similar between these viruses. And what other unique feature is that most of the human infecting beta coronaviruses are I mean, most of the coronaviruses fall into beta coronaviruses, and some of the human infecting also fall into alpha coronaviruses. And mostly in case of gamma and delta, you have most of birds and other animals. Even the whales, they have a coronaviruses. This is a slide I was telling. So the mainly they have 16 non-structural proteins which involved in the replication mechanism, and 4 structural proteins which really involved in the structure of the viruses, especially the spike protein, which is the key for the interaction with the host. So what is very important in non-structural protein is RNA-dependent RNA polymerase, which is necessary for the RNA to convert into many copies of RNA for the virus to replicate, and 2 proteases, the 3CL-Pro and peptide-like proteases, which are mainly essential for them to cleave the polypeptide into a single peptide to become active. Another 2 important thing is that the non-structural protein 1 and non-structural protein 2, they are very important because they steal the host machinery. They completely take the mRNA of the host, and also involved in the escaping from the innate immune response of the human host. As I said earlier, pretty similar to SARS-CoV, SARS-CoV-2 also uses ACE2 receptor. This is more or like a lock and key mechanism. They have a specific binding to the ACE2 receptor, and these are the host membrane surface proteases, the TMPRSS2, which is a furin proteases which cleaves the spike protein into 2 part, that is S1 S2 domain, and which further enhances the entry. And talk about the neutralization by convalescent sera of SARS compared to the SARS-CoV, and they have much more higher neutralization compared to the current SARS-CoV-2. And what is very interesting is in SARS-CoV-2 is that the amount of the titer of antibody produced in each individual is really different, and the mechanism is not clearly understood why these viruses are producing different kind of like, for example, in few hosts they produce high titer, in few hosts they produce very mild level of antibodies. So these are need to be really studied well for the further treatment and other aspects. And so these viruses are slowly mutating a lot. There's a lot of spike protein mutations based on the surveillance from the throughout the world, and you could see the what are the different mutations associated with the different part of the world. I'll explain it in detail. Replication, as we all know, that they bind to ACE2 receptor and go inside and unwind. So this is the real how it takes place. They bind to ACE2 receptor, unpacking the genomic positive RNA. Once they transcription takes place, RNA dependent RNA polymerase takes place the replication, and they produce a lot of mRNAs. They have a unique tendency to produce a genomic RNA as well as subgenomic mRNA. What is subgenomic mRNA is that the 3' will have a poly A, and uniquely all the 5' will have a leader sequence from the 5' end of the genome. So that's what is called as subgenomic mRNA, which is mainly spike protein, other envelope protein. They all produce a lot of subgenomic mRNA. Genomic RNA is the entire in a positive sense RNA, which is a genomic RNA. Once it is produced, it is packed with the nucleocapsid and goes to the rough endoplasmic reticulum and packed inside and undergo post-translation modification in Golgi complex, because the spike protein, other proteins are heavily glycosylated, and after the complete mature viron, they are released out of the cells and go and infect the other cells. This is what I was talking about. The ORF1A and ORF1B, spike protein, envelope, membrane, and non-structural protein Apart from these proteins, the pink colors are other accessory proteins which also have a function in the SARS-CoV-2 virus. And as I said, the red color highlighted region is the different from SARS-CoV, which is encoded in 2003. And these are the highlighted arrows which the proteases cleave them because they express as a polyprotein. So ORF1A and ORF1B. And what is very interesting is that if you remove the ORF1A, ORF1B 1B can't be expressed. Why? Because they undergo a ribosomal phase shift one base for the RDRP to produce. So to just put it very simply, when the RNA RDRP transcribes, they go like this and they come back little back again. They start the protein synthesis. So that's the ribosomal frame shift, and that's how you have a 16 non-structural proteins which mainly involved in the replication of these viruses. These are the nested property of the viruses, which is subgenomic mRNA. You see the C region is the 5' region, which is the leader sequences from the 5', and you have a uniquely all the have a 3' nested. So which means that I'll tell you how it is. There's a special mechanism which is called discontinuous transcription of RNA synthesis. So I'm not going to detail of this. There are two steps. One is initial internal initiation or premature termination. How this takes place is that when the RNA, this is the black color, is the RNA dependent RNA polymerase. When they started the transcript, copying the RNA, they'll start from the 3' and suddenly jump from here to end of the 5'. That's how they take the leader sequences. So start from the 3', synthesize the spike protein or the envelope protein, and then suddenly jump to the 5' region where the leader sequences, which is highlighted in red color. That's how they produce a lot of subgenomic mRNA in the viruses. That's a unique to coronaviruses. That's why they named as nidovirus. And just to show you, there are two main databases, GS8, which is currently having more than 60,000 genomes now throughout the world, which represents the viruses from the different part of the world. This is really very good initiative because this is really helping us to understand the how this virus evolve, how this virus is mutating, and what could be the possibility of the vaccine design, and whether it could be a global coverage or we need to have a very individual country specific vaccines. And other databases, the Nextstrain novel coronavirus databases, where you can get a lot of information about the mutations, about the clade, how they evolve, and so many aspects you can get it from the Nextstrain databases. And what is important is that the Nextstrain database work as a secondary databases because they take the primary data from the GS8. And when they initially started, they started with one viruses, and they slowly evolved as 3 different viruses in the beginning. This is the study from Foster et al. And after a few days, they were like becoming 8 different strains throughout the world. And this is the map showing how these 8 viruses predominantly found in a different part of the world. And later there are like different mutations keep originating from the different part of the world, and these are keep recorded by GS8. And currently recently we had more than 10 clades, and majority of the viruses fall into A2A clades. These are the viruses which mostly found in the Europe as well as the USA. So these are like special clades which is mostly found only in the European and US, and other rest of them are found in the Asia and Asia Pacific region and the Eastern countries. And this is the how these A2A clade which keeps spreading between the different part of the world. You see the proportion in India. We have less proportion of, not less proportion, around roughly 40% of A2A, and more than 50% is the O clade, which is a really which was seen in China. You see the China, they are gray color. This is what the Wuhan strains. So these are pretty similar to Wuhan strains. And this is just to show you that how the Asia strains looks like, and other part of the strains from different part of the world. So what it is really indicating is that each area they have a unique strains originating or unique strains mutating based on the ethnicity. You see, most of the Asia they have somewhat similar kind of strains circulating, and other part of them they have a different strains. And since I'm going to talk about spike protein, I just briefly tell you how the spike protein looks like. This is the spike protein, which is 1273 amino acids with the signal peptide and N-terminal domain. This is the key domain. This is called receptor binding domain. This is very essential for them to interact with the ACE2 receptor, and they have a receptor binding motif. That's the key 6 residues for interact with them. And this is the cleavage site S1 S2, the host cleavage site where it is cleaved, and then it enhances the cell entry. And we also have the transmembrane domain and cytoplasmic terminals. So this is the cryo-EM structure, and this is a trimeric form. They form a trimer on the surface of the virus, which means that 3 proteins of the same spike protein join together, and they form a trimer, and then they interact with the ACE2 receptors. So this is a recent study we did. What we did is we took around 172 genome of Indian SARS-CoV-2. We took them and we analyzed them, and we understand how these viruses are, and spike, not only spike protein, we also analyzed other regions as well, but we mainly focus on spike protein. Why? Because the most of the vaccines and other inhibitory targets mainly focus on spike protein. So as I said, we took around 172. Of that, relieving the sequences which add N, we had 166 genome, and of that mostly from Delhi and Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, and Gujarat. So what we found is that we found around 40 different mutations in the Indian genome, and we separated them into synonymous mutation and non-synonymous mutations. Synonymous mutations resulted in no amino acid changes, but still there are a lot of problems associated with the synonymous mutations. I'll come to that. The main problem associated is two. One is a diagnostic point of view. There is a problem because there's a change in the nucleotide. There will be a problem in primer binding with the targets, as well as since these sites are already mutating, if there is any further mutation in the spot, which may lead to a non-synonymous mutation, which may or may not make the virus very severe, or may make them to a less severe form. It depends on what kind of amino acid changes they undergo. So I want to stress two important factors here. One is we observed four silent mutation in the receptor binding motif, and also we had a unique mutations which mostly seen in Indian strains, which is almost like 62 strains had this mutation, which is silent Y789Y mutations, which is mostly seen in Tamil Nadu as well as the Maharashtra. Whereas it is not more common in Delhi or other states which are more severity. So another important thing is that most of the strains are from A2A clade, which are more seen in US and Europe. Another interesting thing is that we could able to really see track the imported cases to India. For example, you see this specific mutation seen in Belgium and Denmark, and that's how these indicate that these strains might have been imported from people who traveled from Belgium or Denmark to India. Okay, so and also if these kind of mutations are more, these clearly indicate that there is a community spread because a unique mutation seen in the different individuals. Also, you could see some specific mutations found in Argentina, Mexico, Canada, US, and also South Africa. So these clearly shows that these mutations or these strains might have been acquired or imported from these countries to India through travel. And we have seen, interestingly, a lot of non-synonymous mutations. Of them, two things are very important. One is, we saw receptor binding domain as well as receptor binding motif. We had mutations, and we also analyzed the impact of these mutations, how they interact with the ACE2 receptors. So that also I'll come to it. And interestingly, in this non-synonymous mutations, we could see equal number of O clades as well as the A2A clades, so which indicate that the Wuhan strains originated from Wuhan to India, slowly changing because they are mutating themselves, making them different from the current Wuhan strains. And other key important one we found is that D614G mutation. This is a unique mutations which majoritarily seen in the Western population, especially US and Europe, where the case severity is really high. So this clearly indicates that these are imported through travel history from US and Europe to India. And other interesting thing is that these mutations are more in northern part of India rather than the southern part of India, because mostly in Delhi, Gujarat, and Bihar, they have more number of these D614G mutations rather than the southern part, where the case severity is very high. And this is just to show you that where are the mutations present. And in receptor binding motif and domain, we have altogether 10 different mutations. Interestingly, we didn't see any mutation at the host protein cleavage site, so which clearly indicate that there is a key role played by these sites, because these are very essential for the virus to invade the human cells. That's why they are not mutating this site. Once they're mutated, they'll weaken the interaction with the host furin cleavage, and that's resulted in inactivation of the viruses or poor replication of the viruses. And this is the key residues, 6 residues which we already saw for the interaction with the ACE2 receptors. These key residues, we checked whether mutation in Indian strains. Interestingly, we found the 494 amino acid key residues have changed in one Indian strain. And so what we did the analysis with the bats, pangolins, and previous SARS-CoV and current Indian SARS-CoV-2 strains which had mutations. And interestingly, what we saw is that the site which is mutated in Indian strain, which is pretty similar to the bad SARS-like viruses, which had same residues in that position, 494 position. And when we started analyzing what could be the impact of these changes, so what we understood is that when there is key residues changed in the these positions, so they really weaken the interactions. So even like comparison of the current SARS-CoV-2 with the previous SARS-CoV, the amino acid residues variations really shows that the SARS-CoV-2 have a higher binding affinity for the spike protein compared to the SARS-CoV. So that's clearly indicate the key residues changes in the spike protein will really either weaken the interaction or much more enhances the interactions based on the amino acid mutations. So just to show you that the 494 mutation, the S in the which interact with the these are the key residues in these ACE2 receptors. Since it is changed to P, it weakened the interaction with the ACE2 receptors. So this is just to show you the structural comparison between the current and previous SARS-CoV, which clearly indicate that even though they're structurally similar for both, it's a superimposing image of both the current SARS-CoV with the previous SARS-CoV-1, but the key residues and the receptor binding domain variations really make them more rapid spread compared to the current. And also, the study clearly shown that the RAP et al. Study clearly shown that this is from the plasma resonance study, surface plasma resonance study, binding affinity, which clearly shows that the SARS-CoV-2 has a much more higher binding affinity compared to the SARS-CoV-2 for the ACE2 receptors. So this is just to show you that the key residues are highlighted in red colors, and the ash colors are residues from SARS-CoV, previous SARS-CoV. So the red color ones are changes in the previous SARS-CoV, which is seen in the current SARS-CoV, which is very essential for enhancement of AC2 binding affinity. And interestingly, what they have done is they have taken since there is a variation in these sites, they have taken antibodies which raised against the SARS-CoV-2, sorry, not SARS-CoV-2, raised against the previous SARS-CoV. They tried to neutralize the current SARS-CoV-2 spike protein. But interestingly, they, in spite of the a lot of structural similarities and the key residues and the few key residues variations, really made them unable to neutralize the current SARS-CoV-2 spike protein. So clearly shows that there is no cross reactivity between the antibodies raised against the SARS-CoV-2 again the previous SARS-CoV for the current SARS-CoV-2. So this is just to show you that the key residues which interact with the ACE2 receptors between the previous SARS-CoV and SARS-CoV-2, you could see really the changes in the amino acids. You see these are the key residues. There is no similarity between the two viruses. Q and here N, it is L, it is Y, it is phenylalanine, it is lysine here. So there's a lot of variations, even though you could see the two structure imposed, right? Green and yellow. Green is the previous SARS-CoV, the yellow is the current SARS-CoV, and the residues highlighted in somewhat dark orange color is the current SARS-CoV. So this clearly shows that in spite of the structural similarities, the key residues changes really made them into a strong binding. Similarly, there are some key residues which seen in Indian strain, especially the first cases which reported in India is from Kerala, and a girl from China who traveled from China to Kerala. She had a strain which had a mutation at 408, which really weakened the interaction between the ACE2 receptor. That was shown by Jia et al. In a study. And talk about D614G mutations. These are really very interesting because when we started analyzing, what we found is that these D614G mutations are mostly found in the A2A clade. This is the normal 10 clades. Just to comparison, I will put it here. A2A clade and other clades, which is mostly seen in Asian countries. And you could see the D614G mutations are really more high in the A2A clade compared to the other clades. So this really indicate that there might be some severity association with these mutations, because there we could see a lot of mutations in these countries like US and most of the European countries. And when we started analyzing the Indian spike proteins, they were clustering into two different clusters. The green one you could see, and the red color ones. The green color ones are pretty similar to the Wuhan strains, and the red color ones are pretty similar to the US and European strains where they had a D614G mutations. So this is clearly show you that how the D614G mutations are majority found in Europe and the western part of the world, and you could see most of the Asian countries still have most of them are D. You could see in China and other part of the Asian countries still they have mostly D. That's why the severity is very less, Whereas in India also we are slowly increasing in number of G mutations, that is D changed to G at the position 614G. And I'll come to the what could be the we predicted what could be the possible mechanism, so that I will share with you. And interestingly, Korber et al. Has shown that the similar mutations increasing globally after these strains originated. You could see the reports from the initial March, they were very less compared to now. So 7D were there like 6, and slowly you could see a lot of sequences done, which shows that more of D, less of G. But slowly now we have the number of frequencies of Gs keep increasing globally. That's really alarming us, and also shows that there are specific mutation clades from the different part of the world. There is one unique cluster from Belgium, which is S94P mutations, which is found uniquely only in Belgium. Interestingly, when we analyze our Indian strains, we could see a few strains which harbored this unique mutations, that S943P mutations, which shows that these strains are definitely originated from Belgium, because these mutations are not seen anywhere else in the world. So these kind of analysis clearly indicate that these might have been originated from Belgium. And also we have found the P12634L, 63L, also an Indian strain, which is uniquely associated with Australian and UK strains. So this clearly indicates this might have been imported from this part of the world. And as I said, there is a unique cleavage site for the virus to enter into the host, which is the S1S2 cleavage site, which has a polybasic cleavage site, a unique residues similar to MERS viruses. And these are the key residues, R and S. This will be cleaved, and then they'll interact with the much stronger affinity with the host receptors. And what we found is that, and what make them these strains severe. So what could be the possible mechanism? So when we started analyzing the genome, I mean the amino acid residues near the cleavage site, we found that they are pretty conserved. So which clearly shows that the mutation also fall in the conserved region from 608 to 618. This is a D, which is changing to G. So which clearly indicate that these are playing a very key role in the host cleavage mechanism, either maybe for a strong binding to the spike protein, or for some kind of interaction with the host cell. So when there is a mutation in this site, which really make them fastening the cleavage or producing an additional cleavage site. So this is the G from an Indian strain. I could show you like Indian strain, which could show G mutations in the spike protein. And interestingly, Bhattacharya et al. From India also done analysis on D614G mutations, which clearly showed that these changes have introduced another cleavage site in the protein, which enhances the viral entry much more than the normal. Okay, so this can be cleaved by another enzyme called host elastase 2, which can clearly indicate that there is additional cleavage on this because of the amino acid residue changes. You could see how this D is there, and how the cleavage site of the S1S2. And interestingly, Hoffman et al. Have shown that when there is multiplastic cleavage site is there, the virus are able to efficiently enter into the cells compared to the mutated site. So what they've done is they've taken the wild type strain as well as the strain which is mutated, the host cleavage site, that is S1, S2 cleavage site is mutated, and they've kept a wild type. So when they've done it, the host furin will not be able to cleave the site. So there is inefficiency of the viruses enter into the lung cells. So this clearly shows that how crucial these factor for the cell entry and also for the infection. So this study clearly shows that the multiple cleavage in the spike protein will result in the enhanced viral entry and lead to the severity of the disease. So this might be the reason for why the D614G mutations really increasing the case fatality rate might be, but we need to do a lot of studies in order to prove this. And you could see that how these proportion of these mutations in the ICU outpatients and also in case of inpatients. You see the D614, which is most higher in the outpatient group rather than the ICU patients, whereas the G614 is more in ICU patients compared to the D614. And also what they've done, this is a one ICU, you see D614G is only 3 patients, whereas G614 is 20 in case of inpatients. So the proportion of these mutations are pretty high in case of patient groups. You could see from the graph as well. Outpatients, these are from D6 and these are from G614, pretty high in the IC group. And also irrespective of that, the cycle CT value in case of G614 is little higher or more or less similar to that of the D614G. This is very interesting. How slowly the orange is the D and the blue one is the G. How slowly these viruses are changed into completely a G mode, which means that severity mode. You could see from Canada, US, and New York, Australia, and Germany as well, and most of the European countries. You could see slowly the G mutations have changed into complete G mutations. This is really interesting from our study. What we did is we compared the number of cases from the Indian states with the mutations observed in each state. What we found interestingly is that we found the mutation D614G in Delhi, Gujarat, and also Karnataka, and also Madhya Pradesh, and Uttar Pradesh, and West Bengal. Wherever the case fatality rate is really high, there we could able to well correlate these D614G mutations compared to the states where there is a less of death rate. Like whereas in case of in Tamil Nadu, we had a very less death rate initially. Those times we had only Y789Y mutation, silent mutations, which I told you already, like which we could see from Maharashtra and Tamil Nadu. And so this we need to do a further studies in order to clearly elucidate the mechanism how this D614G involved in the severity. And also other study from Bono et al. Clearly shows that a distinct phylogenetic cluster seen in India, and they have shown a A3I, which is really coming up in India uniquely, which is not seen in Western populations. Another interesting thing is that most of these strains are confined to the most southern part of the India rather than the northern part. And Delhi also we have very high of these clades, and most it is found in Tamil Nadu and some part of the southern states. And what is unique to these A3I is that they have a silent mutation, which I showed you now. The Y789Y mutation. This is the Y78 silent mutation. And what we observed from these studies is that there are like some unique mutations seen in the nucleocapsid as well as the non-structural protein 3. So which is, I already told you, which is very essential for stealing the host missionaries and escaping from the innate immune system. So I probably suspect that this might be the reason now for India why the severities keep increasing in Indian, especially in Tamil Nadu and other part of the India. So this is just to show you that the non-structural protein mutations, and other interesting thing is that non-structural protein has a different domains, and there is a domain of nucleic acid binding domain, which is very essential for binding to the host mRNA, which means that it will completely steal the host mRNA, completely make the host cell to inactive. So the host cell will not replicate, only the virus will replicate. And you could see how uniquely only the Indian clusters have these mutations. C6312A mutations. Only this yellow highlighted is the only Indian strains. You see, excuse me, the ORF3, I mean the non-structural protein 3 nucleic acid domain, which is mostly seen in India and also some part of the Asian countries like Singapore. Next to India, Singapore has, and Indonesia and Philippines has the more number of these cases. So this clearly shows that this might have been originated from any part of these Asian countries or from India to this part of the Asian countries, because we could see some of the mutations are very unique to the Indian strains, not found in the other part of the world. And this is just to evidence to show that a paper which clearly shows that the non-structural protein 3 has a nucleic acid binding domain, which is really essential for inactivating the host mRNA. So these are the different part of non-structural protein 3. Each one have a different function, ubiquitin-like RNA binding, proteases, cleavage. This is the protease activity of this protein, non-structural protein. This function as protease activity, and this is the key area where we found the mutation, that is nucleic acid binding domain, which is very essential for binding with the mRNA of the host. And apart from that, we could also see the RDRP, RNA-dependent RNA polymerase, which is uniquely seen in Indian strains, which may enhance the replication of the viruses. Again, you see the how these viruses are distributed, which is not seen in the interestingly, which is not seen in the majority, not seen in the Western populations. Just to show you like how the spike protein silent mutations, these are not seen in any part of the world, but mostly some of the Asian countries and especially in Indian country. And also in nucleocapsid protein, we could see the mutations, which is also pretty much unique to the Indian strains rather than the other part of the world. So which clearly shows that these mutations are very unique to Indian strains. We have a unique clades, and these are keep spreading between the individual, and community transmission also evident from these analysis, I would say. So as I said earlier, the S94GP, which is a Belgium clade, which is not seen in any part of the world, only in Belgium. We could see interestingly Indian strain which have the same mutations, but instead of P they have a T. And also one Belgian strain also had the same T mutation. So which clearly indicate 100% these strains might have been imported from Belgium through travel. And again, this is very interesting. What we found is that we also found co-occurrence of some mutations, and we could see the D614G was association with the D294D mutations. Interestingly, most of these associations were seen in Delhi, patients from Delhi. So which clearly shows that the strain is unique to Delhi and circulating within the Delhi, which clearly indicate early indication for the community spread. Also, unique mutations in Gujarat, unique mutations in West Bengal, and unique mutations in Tamil Nadu, which clearly indicate that the strain is already into a community spread, which is clearly indicated by these mutation analysis. Again, this is very interesting. Pet animal can transfer COVID-19. Previously, there was no evidence for the transmission, but what we did is we did some analysis, and what we did, we took the strains from animals, which was transferred from human to animals, and we retrieved the genome of these. Like what we did is we took from a genome from infection from a tiger, and also from canine, and also from feline, and also from few from environmental strains from Australia. So when we started comparing these genome of the animal infection, that is from human to animal, when we started comparing, what we found interesting is that these strains are pretty similar to what human has. So this is really interesting because when they change from one host to host, so they may undergo some mutations, right, for the adaptation. But interestingly, in these virus, we couldn't see any specific alterations on the key areas. We could see hardly one or two mutations that also in the 3' or 5' UTR, that is untranscribed regions, which are not involved in the any of the pathogenic mechanisms. So that is really interesting. And what we temporarily conclude is that there is a high possibility for these viruses from animal to human again. Why? Because these strains are still similar to the what observed in human. So there is a possibility from again from animal to human they can go back because they are pretty similar. So they can infect the human again. And also there are study which clearly shows that the AC2 receptor of human have some kind of homology with the animals as well. So which clearly indicate that they're not need not to be undergo a lot of mutations to interact with the animal AC2 receptors. So what could be the impact of these mutations in diagnosis? So when there is a mutation, we all know that it is diagnosed by real-time PCR. The real-time PCR mainly identified by collecting the samples, RNA extraction, do the reverse transcription by using specific primers, and also by real-time PCR by probes. These probes have complementary bases binding to the target of SARS-CoV-2. Imagine that when there is a probe bind, there will be cleavage by the enzymes and fluorescence will come off. That shows the patient has SARS-CoV-2. That will be shown as a peak. Whereas when there is any mutation, these primers or probes will not be able to bind because of the non-complementarity. So which resulted in the negative results even though the patient is positive. So there could be a possibility of false negative results due to the mutations. So I'll explain you clearly here. This is a wild type strain. This is the primer. Once they bind, they will amplify and show us a fluorescence. Okay, perfectly fine. When the strains undergo a mutation A and T, it is mutated at crucially 3'. Especially the mutation to 5' is not of much origin. Whereas in case of 3' region where the efficient binding should be considered as a mutation, so which resulted in the no fluorescence at all. So here there will be a fluorescence which is positive. There is no fluorescence in spite of the patient harboring the SARS-CoV-2. You are not able to predict it. So that is the impact of mutations, both silent as well as synonymous mutations. That is missense mutations, which resulted in the which result in false negative results. So the patient go out unknowingly, he may spread. So community transmission can occur a lot. So what could be the problem when talk about vaccine? So we all know that the big race is going on for SARS-CoV-2 vaccine, and different types of vaccines are available: virus-like particle, nucleic acid-based, viral vector, protein-based, and so on. But even though, in spite of different vaccine models are available, most of them are planning for spike proteins. And how they can help, when once they go inside, they make a memory and memory antibodies of both immune cells as well as antibodies, which can be waiting for the viruses to come in, and they can neutralize the viruses so that you will not have less severity or no infections at all. That's how the vaccines protect, right? So there are a lot of vaccines companies who are playing a big role in developing the vaccines. It's very fast in development because usually it take longer time for the development of vaccines. for clinical trials. So most of these companies are focusing on spike protein. So as I told you, like there are a lot of preclinical studies are required in animals, and clinical studies, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, finally it goes to the mass vaccinations. So usually it takes from 10 to 15 years or 20 years, but now in current SARS-CoV-2, scientists have acted very fast, and they have tremendously worked for a lot of promising vaccines are coming up, but still we need to be more consider for the efficacy of the vaccine for global coverage. And what is very important is here is that these spike protein mutations may lead to the poor neutralization of the virus vaccines, and one should be very much cautious about designing the vaccines considering these spike proteins because mutations, because each mutations are very unique to different geographical region. So you need to be more cautious in order to design the vaccines. It should be a pan vaccine, which is a global vaccine, or we may need to develop a kind of a pentavalent or multivalent vaccines in order to cover a global populations, like how in case of pneumococcal vaccines, or we may need to come out with seasonal vaccines like flu vaccines. And also monoclonal antibody from llama has shown very effective. These are also known as camelid. These are small camels. What is the unique feature of this is that they are very small in size. They will not induce antigenicity in human. So they are like only the heavy chain alone is enough. Not even light chain is required. Whereas in case of human, we also need light chain. Whereas in this case, only heavy chain is alone enough. Only the fat portion is alone enough. And when we talk about these monoclonal antibody and vaccines, what is the biggest problem is that mutations. As I told you, these mutations, we could see 30 times, we could see these mutations in US and England, we could see these mutations, which also seen in India. And also these S494P mutations in England, also seen in India. So like this, these mutations are keep increasing, which really problematic because they may lead to improper neutralization of the vaccines. How vaccines can protect us is like by acting as a dead end. Once a person is immunized, even from a virus transfer to contagious to immunized, it will act as a dead end, will not be spread to the susceptible host. That's how immunization help us. Also, there's something called herd immunity, which is a natural immunity. For that, we need to have at least 80% of population need to be immunized naturally so that we can prevent the spreading between the individuals. Finally, convalescent plasma therapy. We all know that plasma from patients who recovered after 28 to 23 days, they'll take a blood and do the plasmapheresis, take the antibody, used for severe patients who are very sick for the viral neutralization. And there are a lot of problems associated with that, mainly the screening steps, processing, and also the risk of transferring the different strain of viruses which are not completely eliminated from the body, or some other viruses as well. And what is the main problem in case of convalescent plasma therapy in terms of spike protein mutation is that, as I said already, a different individual has different antigenicity response, different antibody response, titer response. So when we transfer antibody from one patient to other, if the virus antibody is very less, there will be a poor neutralization, and also strain variations also lead to a improper neutralization or no neutralization. That's what I showed you. SARS-CoV antibodies doesn't neutralize the SARS-CoV-2. It's shown by clearly a study. And so what we hypothesize that when we transfer a plasma therapy, what could be an ideal method is that recently we saw some paper which shows that convergent antibody, that is collect pooled antibodies from different individuals and use it, so that even though they had a different strains, there is a chance for neutralizing. Or what we can do is, first we can do the strain matching between the individuals, and then we can transfer the plasma. If the strain is matched, yes, of course, we can transfer the plasma. If strain is not matched, don't transfer. That's how. So these are the mutations which we saw in India, and these are the impacts of these mutations in Indian strains as well as the global strains, especially in case of diagnosis, in case of vaccine, and in case of monoclonal antibody treatment. There's a lot of problem we could see. Thank you so much for your patience to listening the talk, and I'm happy to answer your questions if you have any.
Thank you, Dr. Naveen, for that wonderful presentation. It was really an extensive presentation on coronavirus and its mutation. I have certain questions asked by the participants. I'll be displaying it on PowerPoint presentation. You could answer it one by one.
Yeah,
We
yeah.
have a
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Please wait.
Yeah. So the first question is, I couldn't see the slides. Okay.
Yeah, they've asked, Krishnan Mahalakshmi has asked, is it possible to associate the D and G states to clinical severity?
Yeah, so as I said earlier, so we could really see the association of these mutations with the severity. Even though the number of association is not high, but we could see a positive association between the D and G strains with the clinical severity. That's what clearly shown in the a study from UK, where they have found most of the patients who are ICU cases, they have more G mutations rather than the D mutations. So the D was more seen in the outpatients or inpatients rather than the G. So that we could see clinical severity association.
Okay.
Does mutation have any effect on virulence of the viruses? Yes, definitely. That's what I told you. Like there was in spike protein as well as not only spike protein, even the non-structural protein 3, we could see a mutation which really, especially in the mRNA binding domain, had a mutations. So which may indicate that they may have a more stealing of viral mRNA for that matter, so they can escape from the innate immunity if they do that. As there are mutations possible to have vaccines. That's what the spike protein has lot of mutations, which indicate that we need to have a very good strategy to have a very good vaccine, either multivalent vaccines which cover globally a different part of the countries, or conserved residues which can elicit antibody response, so that a single vaccine, peptide vaccines, can really help in global coverage. So if it is not possible, then what we have to do is we have to definitely go for a multivalent vaccines which can be able to give a global coverage. What are all the steps we have to eradicate totally? To answer to Vaishnavi Prakash, so we need to do like all the precautions like hand wash and so on to eradicate it totally. Like polio, it may take a time because it just emerged. It need to. So what we hypothesis that when these viruses completely infect, they finally undergo a lot of mutation. At one point of time, there will be kind of mutations which become very fragile in nature, so there will not be much more severity of these viruses. For example, we could see that some of the mutation in spike protein Indian strain, instead of enhancing the attachment to the spike protein, they weaken the interaction of the spike protein, weaken the interaction of the ACE2 receptor. So which clearly indicate that when these mutations keep on occurring, at one point of the time, the viruses will be lose its severity, I mean the virulence of it, and then finally it will be helpful for us also. Is D614G mutation in spike protein make COVID-19 more contagious? Uh, to talk about contagious, I'm not sure whether these mutations will be responsible for contagious, but of course they are maybe responsible for viral severity when within the host, because contagious is mostly spreading. I'm not sure how spike protein G mutations can be responsible. Might be some other changes in the genome which makes them more stable in the environment. That's why they are more like contagious. Might be this also, but we need to do a study to show that this is responsible for more contagious also, apart from infections. Will COVID-19 eventually become weaker and become part of? That's what I said. Like when they eventually keep mutating themselves, at one point of time, you could see some part of the world already the curve is flattening. That's because already the entire population is encountered and a lot of mutations has gone. That shows the viruses become a normal respiratory viruses. The time, it depends on how rapid these viruses are mutating. Based on there is a calculation for mutation rate analysis, based on the yearly rate mutation analysis. So what we found, there is a study from India, Banu et al. Clearly shown that in Indian strains, the mutation rate per year is much more higher than compared to the other part of the world. So which clearly shows that even soon we may have a flatten the curve because of a lot of mutations. We have to wait and see how these mutations reduce the infections. Is it possible the novel COVID create artificially? So this every webinar people ask, but still like there is no solid evidence to show that these viruses are created manually, because these viruses are naturally present, and there is a more possibility for these viruses to naturally evolve. So as of now, we may not be able to tell clearly that it might be a man-made. So it's so far there is no evidence. If there is a mutation, it gives false negative result. What is the use of allele specific PCR? So there is no allele specific PCR in case of SARS-CoV-2. What we have is that we have different gene specific PCR, real-time PCR. One is N gene, S gene, E gene, and RDRP. And so because of the strain variations, there is a lot of possibility to misdiagnose in case of real-time PCR. So that's why now you could see initial primers designed by CDC also had some changes. Now they are coming up with different strategies instead of going for. So what is our hypothesis for this solution for this mutation is that instead of going for 1 or 2 targets, we advise to go for 4 targets. So conserved regions of 4 targets will really help us to pick up definitely at least even two genes are mutated, the other rest 2 can be picked up. So in that case, at least 2 gene positive can clearly indicate an infection in a patient. Some local TV channel was showing the people of blood group A more vulnerable to 19 can be true. So there are studies which shown that the B group has more numbers, but there are a lot of studies are needed in order to show the vulnerability of the A group, because what we hypothesize that these viruses also have attachment to sialic acid. Sialic acid is a carbohydrate on the cell surface. So the blood group A antigen is also a carbohydrate, which may indicate that whereas the O group doesn't have that carbohydrate on the surface. So which may clearly indicate they may have some strong interaction with the A group. And there are some studies which previously shown that some of the respiratory viruses are much more common in A group rather than the O group. So that might be, but at the same time, we should be very cautious. If the study was done in a population where the more A group is available, then maybe we may be biased. So we need to have a very good, well-structured study in order to prove the association of the viruses with more of A group. Many strains are identified so far, and how many more virulence? So, yes, of course, many viruses are these viruses are globally mutated, and majority of them are A2A clades, and which had showed a more severity, especially in US and Europe. So the A2A clade is more severe form compared to the other clades. But still, we could see a lot of mutation in other part also. So we should wait, because as the number of genome keep increasing, we could see a lot of informations we are getting, and that will really help us to in-depth and understand us more depth about these new human invader, and which will help us in coming up with a very good vaccines or diagnostic strategy. Thank you. So that's all.
Thank you, sir, for that discussion. I have.
Somebody's
Sir,
asking.
can we discuss it?
Yeah, sure, definitely.
Yeah. One question is like it's a kind of a verdict by one of the participants. Bats are neither responsible for the outbreak of COVID nor the pandemic. They are very important creatures of nature which aid in sustaining the different aspects of the food chain. But recently we are seeing that these bats are connected to the spread of the virus from Wuhan. What is your point of view in that? Can you shed light on that?
See, the thing is that not only bats, even if you take other animals, even birds, as the coronaviruses. So we could see most of the viruses we encountered are originated from bats. You take some of the birds, you take even the whale as coronaviruses, pig as coronaviruses, dog as coronaviruses. There are specific coronaviruses to different animals. But what is the real problem is that until unless you don't bother them, they are not coming into human contact. So what we are trying to do is that we are disturbing the nature. So by going close contact to the nature, we are there's a spillage. So crossover spillage takes place from animal to human, and many of us are thinking that these viruses are suddenly showed up in 2019. It's not so. This might have been already into the human community long back. They were slowly adapting in human, and finally at one point of them, once they adapted to the human host, they keep rapidly spreading. So they take some time. So it's not to blame the bats, it's to blame the human community where they have made the mess up, not the bats.
Yeah, definitely. And the last question, is it feasible to match strains between the donor and the recipients in this current scenario for plasma therapy?
Yeah, exactly. So what we can suggest is that it need not to be the entire genome matching. You match only the spike protein, because that is what the key area where we are going to neutralize it. So that is very simple. It is just a 3000 base pair sequences, or you go more specifically on the receptor binding motif, which is much more shorter, just 300, 400, 500 bases. That's it. A simple PCR can do. So once you do the PCR, do a sequencing, just match it, and once it is matched, definitely you can go for a. Nowadays, the technology is very high. So we have a technology called a nanopore in our laboratory. Within 10 to 15 minutes, you can get the sequences. Or maximum, I'm not exaggerating, maximum within 1 hour, you can get the sequences of both. The whole genome itself.
Yeah.
The entire 30,000 bases, you can get it within 1 hour. So that's easy. Nowadays, technology is advanced. So instead of waiting, we can do the strain matching, and definitely we can give the plasma therapy, which will be, I am sure, pretty sure that will be much more effective. Or if you are constrained about cost, you can go for a spike protein specific sequencing.
So, thank you, sir, for that informative.
Yeah, thank you.
And
Somebody asked bone marrow or something. I couldn't see the question.
yeah, wait a second. They have asked uh, why there are no
Use
proper
bone marrow
contamination
transplant or
went
any.
for medicines and clinical trials from Ayurveda and Siddha.
Yeah, so there are like many clinical trials are going on from Ayurveda and Siddha. Even the Ministry of Ayush has approved a lot of things. There's keep on studies going on, but the main limitation with the our traditional medicines are we don't have very solid evidence. Even though we have a very good evidence on the treatment part of it, so we give the patients they recover. But what is essentially needed is that we have to show at the bench level how much reduction of the viruses are taking place at the cell line level. Either you work with the pseudovirus or the live virus and show the effective reduction of the viral load, and then it can be really a very good effect. We also done some study on in silico analysis on medicines along with collaboration with MGR Medical University. So we could see really some of the promising Ayurveda and Siddha drugs, but we need a very good solid data on that to prove they are very effective at the lab level, and then we can do the study. And definitely, if you do that, or what we can do is instead of going for a laboratory study, you can give it to the patients on the day one, do a real-time PCR, check the CT value, on the second day, follow the treatment, do a CT value, how the viral load is reduced. Go for third day, like that. Along with the treatment, see the prognosis of the patients, how the CT shift takes place. That is a really very good prognosis marker how these traditional medicines are really working. Because since they don't have side effects, we can very well treat the patients and then simultaneously read the results and see how dramatically they reduce the viral load. Thereby, we can start suggesting these traditional medicines. Finally, one question: bone marrow transplant. So here, like, it's not because of the immune problem. Actually, immune system is the main problem. If you do a bone marrow transplant, again you're making them more vulnerable because you tend to make more cytokines, and that really damage them. So what is mainly suggested is the steroids, methylprednisolone or prednisone or dexamethasone 0.5 mg, which is really very effective, I would say, because once they reduce the immune reaction, the cytokine storm is really reduced. Thereby, the pathology is reduced so that you don't go for a lung damage or ground glass appearance. It's really working good. And phage therapy will not definitely work because these are all the viruses. Phage is also virus. If it is a bacteria, we can try phage therapy, but still, in even bacteria, it is not that much treatable. So phage will not definitely work.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
The questions have been answered. Now it's time to propose the vote of thanks in a formal way. I heartily thank the management for giving this opportunity to organize this webinar session for students, researchers, and scholars, research scholars, and professors, and other industry peoples from various other institutions. I also thank our chief guest, beloved guest, who has also consented in a short duration of time to provide this lecture to all of us. And I hope it's a really interesting one also, and it's also the time need of the hour to discuss this topic. I see people are typing questions here. These questions can be sent to his email ID, which I will share it through the feedback form. Thank you, sir, for being here with us today. So individually thank all the participants for both online in this live in this chat box as well as on the YouTube session, live streaming session. And I will share the feedback link on the chat box as well as the feedback link will be sent to you by email to your registered email IDs. Kindly fill it and submit it as a proof of your attendance so that your certificates will be shared again through email after 5 working days. Thank you for being here with us today, Sir Dr. Naveen. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, all the participants.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Please wait for the link to be prompted on chat box. After that, after submitting, you can leave the prompt. Thank you.